Tony, who started this season as head coach. Now is listed as a player coach and is on the active player roster. And has been hitting at an amazing clip. He's hitting 320, much better than he ever hit at any other time during his playing career. He said it's because the pressure is off, that he doesn't have the pressure that he did when he was simply a player. Pitches outside for a ball. He says now he doesn't worry too much. He just goes up there and swings because he thinks that he is primarily on the active player list for the purpose of helping the younger pitchers. Due to behind the plate, as a result, he's hitting 320. Swings and fouls it off. It's 1-1.
Welcome to the BBA Today, your podcast that covers events around the Brewster Baseball Association every day with your host, Yellow Springs 9 General Manager, Ron Collins. And now, let's get on with the show.
All right, welcome to the fourth edition of this daily podcast. It's almost like it's becoming a habit today. My co-host today is Joe Lederer from the Boise Spuds. I definitely appreciate you coming and spending your time with me here today, Joe.
I appreciate the invite. Looking forward to it.
Let me take about a minute or two and ask you a little bit about the Boise Spuds, but I know you've got prepared for us a fun little trip through kind of the top 10 minor league starts of the year that you've been looking at. So give us a chance to spread out and look at some other things around the league. How are you thinking about the Boise Spuds right now?
I'd be lying if I said I wasn't concerned. The start isn't what we had planned. I wasn't expecting French to come out of the gates hitting 500 like he did last year and being in first place. But, 2 games under 500, it's not the end of the world, but there are some really good teams in the Frontier division. So I'm optimistic. I'm hoping, May is a new month and we string together some wins.
There you go. Well, you had your chance to trade French to me back when the iron was hot, but not to say, I told you so, or you had your chances, or, if it really got down to it, we could probably revisit that conversation a little bit, just because I'm a good guy,
Well, that passing on that trade is what keeps me up at night, not the coronavirus or what's going on at my work, but definitely passing up on that trade.
I can definitely understand why you would feel that way. So anyway, thank you so much for spending some time in looking at minor league hot starts. I'm very interested to see what you come up with. So do you want to just kind of walk us down through?
Yeah, I thought we could just start single A and go up. Obviously, the 2 lowest levels haven't started yet. That'll be in the end of May. But I just thought in no order of most interesting, but just kind of going through the levels from the bottom to the top.
That's outstanding. Where do you want to start?
Cool. Well,
what do you got for us?
Single A, Charlie Pegler League. There's a couple that are really interesting. They're both on the same team. The first guy is Pedro Martinez, first baseman of the Lake City Limes, and that is Seattle's Class A team. We're going to hear this a lot in this episode, but he was part of the 2038 Super Draft. He was a 4th rounder, 21 years old. He's repeating Class A, which isn't terrible for a 21-year-old, really. But he's hitting pretty impressive out the gate, 315, 414, and a 702 slugging. That's on pace for 57 home runs, almost 100 walks, and over 20 steals to boot. So he's a nice little player, good defensive first baseman, and it'll be interesting because Seattle's first baseman, Jose Estrada, his contract runs out at the end of the year, so maybe Martinez could fill in, especially if he keeps hitting the way he does, and maybe he bumps a little bit, but I think he won't be in single A for too much longer.
It would be interesting to see him move into the major leagues like real quick, just to see how far that could translate. So yeah, interesting guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And then a teammate of his is Jose Velez. So that's 2 players on the Lake City Limes, and they're off to a really good start. They have two guys on this list. They're 21 and 11. So they've had some nice contributions. Velez is a catcher. He was actually drafted last year in the 18th round. So it's one of these kind of cool stories where you kind of take a flyer on a guy, and right off the bat, he's producing. He's pretty much fully developed. He was drafted out of college, so he's kind of reached kind of his peak here. He could fill out a little bit more, but he's hitting almost 400. He's got a on-base percentage over 500 and a slugging percentage nearly 650. He's actually the kind of guy I like. Good clubhouse guy. He's kind of well-rounded. He's not spectacular, but he doesn't have any really glaring holes offensively, but he's a really nice defensive catcher. Last year in rookie ball, I think he caught like over 100 innings, and his catcher ERA last year was 1.39, which is pretty incredible. And he's thrown out over 50% of base runners last year and this year.
I think he's a really interesting candidate because he's the exact kind of guy that I absolutely adore to have as a backup catcher, being a left-handed guy and a guy who he doesn't really have holes in his offense. Before contact's a little bit unnerving, but if you can platoon him and he can fake it a little bit. The thing that I love is that super bright blue catcher ability, receiving ability. I love these guys when I had Aaron Stone on my team, put it that way.
Right. They're those complimentary guys, and they can really work for you.
Yeah, and the cool number for him, you listed a whole bunch of good numbers for him. The cool number, and these are completely almost meaningless in a month of minor league play, but 2.2 WAR in a month of minor league play is really interesting for Jose Velez.
Yeah, not bad for an 18th rounder.
There you go.
And then the last guy that kind of interests me that's in single A is Victor Reyes. He's a relief pitcher on the Council Bluff Express. That's Mexico City's single A team. He's 24 years old, and he's spending his 5th season in single A. So we're not talking about a highly thought after prospect. He's extremely old for that level. But he's kind of doing his best Matumi impersonation. He got 10 wins in the first month, actually 9 in the first month, and he got 1 in May, I believe. So he's actually on pace for 44 wins as a reliever, which is quite interesting.
That is actually 10 wins. I'm sorry. Yeah, I don't think he's going anywhere in the near future, but he's one of those guys that you just, as you're perusing the minor league stats, you just love to look at him and go, what must he be like on a Friday night when he's on an off night Friday night as a 25, 24, 20, whatever he is in Able.
Probably tucking the kids in to bed or something like that.
There you go. Then he's off to the bars.
Exactly. I don't blame him.
Yeah, I love that. I've got a couple other guys that I was thrown in there. If you look at San Antonio's organization, their Shreveport franchise in A-ball, 21-year-old Luis Pierre, 13 saves in 13 opportunities at this stage. That's you don't see that very often.
No, that's good to see in that level. If a guy can come in and not blow any saves, it's saves are a little overrated, but to see a guy who doesn't blow it, to take a page out of Shoeless's book, he's a guy that's not going to lose you a game. It sounds like.
There you go. And then here's the Mike Marshall of A-ball. Rick Lee, Ocala Seminoles, the Louisville franchise. 23 games pitched so far in, 30 total games?
He's got an interesting. He's sprinkled in a couple of starts, and he's on pace for over 150 innings. So you got to love a guy who's just going to come out every game and give you a couple of solid innings. So
there's the A-ball level. Want to move on to Double A?
Let's do it. Warren Cox League. Edmund Weber is a name that we actually might hear about maybe in some team news for Montreal here in the future. He's already 24 years old. He was a 7th rounder 5 years ago. And I think he's kind of miscast in Double A. I really think he should be up in Triple A. He actually made it to the bigs already in 2040 for Montreal. He played 13 games and kind of held his own with an OPS over 100 in that limited time. But he's having a great start of the year. He's hitting over 400. He's got a whopping OPS of 1428, and he's just really filling the stat sheet. Looks like he's going to hit. He's on pace to hit close to 40 home runs and get over 100 runs, RBIs, and walks. So I saw the numbers and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And then I realized he actually already played in the majors a couple years ago. So I kind of was scratching my head and was trying to, develop some narrative around it. And I looked at his morale and it says unhappy. And he's probably unhappy that he's in AA, having already had a cup of coffee. So he
says he wants to play in the majors.
Yes.
And realistically, the bottom line is the guy should double as well as Emilio Morales does. So,
exactly.
I mean, you really can't make an argument that he should be in AA.
Right. And, he actually held his own in AAA last year. He had an OPS over 900. So I didn't really dive in deep on the depth chart for what's going on in AAA and in Montreal. But his starting right fielder in Montreal, Kevin McKeith, is struggling, and he's had 3 years of decline. So I think Weber could maybe get a shot just to, say, hey, let's see what this guy can do. Keep his hot bat in the lineup.
Yeah, he could get a shot. There's a couple of guys in AAA that might get a shot with him too, though. It'll be interesting to see what Jeffrey does with Weber.
Yeah, exactly.
Who else you got?
This guy, I don't know if anyone's heard this player. This is a deep cut out of AA, but this player named Carlton Winson. I think he's with the Charm City. He's not with Phoenix. He's with the Alpine Valley Snow Creatures of Portland. We all know Winson. We all love Winson. He's one of the oldest players in the entire minor leagues. And he's really doing Winson things. He's hitting barely above 200, but he's got a on base well over 400 and a slugging over 600. So, I know Wilson, signed a lot of guys to minor league deals, and he's probably just still sorting things around. But I would love to see Winson get a call up to the bigs and platoon at DH with John Mick. I think that'd be pretty entertaining.
Yeah, you take a look at him, and I think he's got a future somewhere, or he's had a past, or something in that. You get a minor league guy like that going, and you just never know what's liable to happen.
Exactly. I don't know if Wilson's grooming him to be a coach or something like that, kind of a Crash Davis type of role, but it'll be interesting how it pans out for the rest of the year.
Well, the one guy I want to throw in for AA is actually he's now sitting in. Oh my goodness, he's now sitting in the Portland Short A League. He's 26-year-old. He's 26-year-old Heiko Bonsick. And he was with the AA Antigua team. 17 earned runs in 6 innings pitched.
Oh.
with 0 home runs.
Just getting singled and doubled to death, it sounds like.
Singled, doubled, and walked. No home runs. Can you imagine that?
Oh man, that's tough. That's an interesting line. That's tough to repeat.
He's got a 25.5 ERA, which you can understand why he's now sitting in the Short A roster, and one wonders why he's just not released to go, try to play against high school kids or something.
And he's got an angry morale, and I don't think he has anyone to blame but himself.
Yeah, you would have to think so. What does his how does that break out? Oh, he's very unhappy with transactions. So.
He is looking at his personality. They say he has very little hustle and has trouble keeping up. So I'm not sure if he's around for much longer.
Alrighty, so let's move on to AAA. Who do you got for me in AAA?
Outstanding. This is the cream of the crop here. These are guys that we'll probably see here shortly, if not this year, then the next year. First guy is on the St. Paul Riverhawks. That's Calgary's AAA team. Tokimasi Ihara is his name. First rounder from Ron. I'll let you take a guess. What draft?
It might be. Let me hold on. Karnak the Magnificent throwing it out. What is 2038?
You got it. First rounder from 2038. He's a nice little player. He's kind of filled out already at 21 years old. He's got a little bit of maybe movement to go. But he was actually drafted, I think he was maybe like a 70 potential. He's down to a 50. So while his as he's filled out, I think the scouts kind of lowered their ceiling on him. But he's still a solid player. He had a really nice line last year in Double-A, and so far this year in 6 starts, he's 5-0 with a 1.31 ERA and a WHIP under .80. So strikes out almost a batter an inning and keeps it under 2 walks per 9.
Ihara definitely took a downgrade from the scout standpoint, but in this pitching poor era, even where he's at, he should be an impact someplace. So that'll be interesting to see when Kevin brings him up.
Yeah, and throws hard, keeps the ball in the ballpark, keeps it on the ground. I think he'll have a decent career once he gets brought up.
Who do you got next?
Next player is Rodrigo Barbosa of the Quincy Fire Dancers, another Portland player. He came over recently in a deal for the winter in the Juan Mendoza salary dump, and he's really adjusted nicely in the Portland organization. He's on pace to hit 63 home runs. I'm not sure if that's going to hold up or not, but he's hitting 300 on base, nearly 400, and he's got an incredible slugging percentage of over 800. So a really nice start, but the bad news is he actually just suffered a fractured wrist actually a couple games ago. So it looks like he's going to be on the IL for 5 or 6 weeks or so.
Yeah, and that's a real shame. It would be a lot of fun to see Barbosa come up. He's kind of the anti-Morales in that sense. He's got the power coming in, and he's got the gap power. That's the thing, right? You look at Emilio Morales, and he's got power, and he has some contact, but he doesn't double and he doesn't walk, either one of the two. In this case, you've got a guy who can get on base a little bit, but he's got the double and the home run power. So knock on wood that Barbosa doesn't take a real downgrade because of that injury, because I would love to see what Portland does with him up.
Yeah, I think they may just keep him down the rest of the year after he gets back from the injury. And then, it's not really a manipulation of service time. I think it's justifiable if the guy has a fractured wrist to let him play out. But I think we'll see him next year for sure.
Yeah, or maybe you see him in a September call-up then.
Exactly. And one thing is we have named a couple of Portland teams, Barbosa's of the Quincy Fire Dancers. Some of the GMs in the league, and certainly some of the newer GMs from the last maybe 2 or 3 seasons, what they may not know is Chris Wilson's affinity to the Dave Matthews Band. So if you're a Dave Matthews Band head and like their music, you should check out the team names of Madison and Portland, because most of them are homages to the band's albums.
Yes, indeed.
I think it's a great part of the league lore.
There you go. I appreciate you bringing that up. That's a good point.
For sure. Got a couple more here real quickly.
Sure.
Pedro Guzman of the Ashland Slow Riders. That's Phoenix's AAA team. He's actually a legit prospect. He's one of the better power hitting prospects. 9 contact, 11 gap, 10 home runs. So this guy can be a serious offensive force in the future. I believe he leads the entire minors in WAR so far with 2.9, which would be on pace for over 13 for the season. Hitting 460, 550, 820. So that's a OPS of over 1,300. And he mashed last year. He had over 6 WAR last year in AAA, OPS of over 1,000. So I think he is really ready to be called up here.
Yeah, he definitely could play. There's no question about that. I have my standard conversation about guys who are ready to play but not fully fleshed out yet, and he's a good candidate or a good item to talk about there with that 7 out of 10 home run power and 8 out of 9 contact. I tend to personally not like to have somebody up until they're like a point away. That 8 to 9 contact doesn't worry me, but the 7 to 10 power, I'd almost like to see him get to 8 or 9 before I would personally say definitely bring him up. But in Phoenix's situation, you probably wait until next year anyway at 21.
Yeah, exactly. Just 21 years old, so he's not rotting away. He'll get plenty of opportunity here, and another 2038 first rounder.
Who do you got next?
Someone I got next is someone that's near and dear to your heart, and I'd love to hear your analysis on him. It's Robert Chenoweth of the Indianapolis Downforce. That's your AAA team there. Correct me if I'm wrong. Did he lead the minors last year in WAR?
He might have led the minors last year in WAR. He did end up with 73 total home runs last year, if you count Winter League and his time in Double-A. 73 home runs in 58 games, if I'm doing my mental math right. That would actually be that's a pretty good number. He clearly needs more seasoning in the minors.
Yeah, clearly, yeah. He's not acclimated himself well to AAA by his over 1,000 OPS. So
no, he would be in the majors right now if it weren't for the fact that I've got Lucas McNeil sitting at first base, and McNeil is still still a benefit against right-handed pitchers. So I'm giving him essentially, as soon as McNeil starts to drive down against right-handed pitchers, Chenoweth will be up, or he'll be up next year no matter what. And we'll find out. We'll find something to do with McNeil.
Yeah, Chenoweth, his name came up in the media guide as kind of a player to watch, and I knew of him, and I kind of looked at him closely, and I was like, oh, well, I wonder. This is before the season started. I was like, I wonder if he's going to start in the bigs. And then I was like, oh, shoot, Lucas McNeil's there. And I was like, well, maybe Ron will keep him down for the year and Lucas will go to free agency. But sure enough, you extended him to a really nice contract. But I still think there's going to be room for Chenoweth with McNeil still under contract.
Yeah, and that'll be a question. If McNeil sticks around for another couple of years, then I'll look at Mark Haynes as Haynes is right now my DH. He's the big right-handed bopper that I've got right now. I could end up moving him or doing something with him. The worst case is I do a option wire with Haynes, and that's not the ideal. The ideal would be to get both Haynes and Chenoweth into the same lineup and let them beat the hell out of left-handed pitchers.
Yeah, that's a frightening thought.
Alrighty, so who else you got?
Last guy to round out the top 10 is another one of your players, also on Indianapolis, Al Colbert. I don't think it's Colbert. I think it might be Colbert, but you would know better than I. Again, 2038 draft. He was a third rounder, and he's had a really nice kind of slow, methodical rise through the minors. And I've kind of noticed that that's kind of your MO there, Ron, is where you kind of let guys just marinate for a full season, and then next season you're going to move them right up, and I really like that. But he's 22 years old, and this is his first taste in AAA. He's had a really nice start: 2.6 ERA, a WHIP under 1, half a walk per 9, which I love. The thing I'd love to hear about you is he was drafted as a starter, even though scouts had him as an 80 potential reliever. Mm-hmm. But you've had him start his entire professional career. I kind of want to find out why you chose to use him as a starter, where he's 50 potential as opposed to an 80 potential reliever, and how you kind of gauge your patience on a guy like that who could maybe bump because of his potential as a reliever. Kind of talk me through that.
Well, I mean, I think ultimately in Colbert's case, he's got the stamina to start. So I like to have my better pitchers starting most of the time anyway, if they've got even a hint of 3 pitches. So I will start a lot of guys as, Kurt Phillips was a starter for most of his minor league career, for example.
Okay.
Despite the fact that I knew that he was almost certainly going to end up being the closer. At the end of the day, he's got this third pitch that's the 2-2 changeup, right? 2-2 changeup. It's kind of good enough to start even in the majors, I think. My intended goal at this stage is that he will either slide in to Louis Colon's slot as the 5th starter, long reliever, but we'll see what we'll see what happens there as far as that's concerned. I do try to make sure that I keep my relievers innings down to 150 or 170 as they're starting. Colbert got 177 innings last year, and it was just a little bit more than I really like to do with my guys who are probably relievers. I've got another guy, Josh Henson, is most likely a reliever in the majors, but he's been starting throughout most of his career. So I will do that a lot with my guys, even if I am pretty sure they're going to be relievers. I'll let them get their 120 to 150 innings.
Interesting. And on the flip side, kind of what they do in the MLB, do you ever use a a guy who is for sure going to be a starter, but you ever call him up and pitch him, maybe his rookie year out of the bullpen with the intention of putting him in the rotation maybe the following year?
Sometimes. I mean, it really kind of depends on what else I've got. I mean, for several years there back in my first little golden age, I had 5 starters that were just rock solid. So anybody who came up went to the bullpen first, right? Because there wasn't a spot to throw. Right now, my intention was to have Colon be the number 5 pitcher, but he's not. He's kind of struggling right now, so I may need to do something. I mean, guys like Colbert and Henson fit into that category of whether I throw them straight into the rotation. But right now, if Colbert were to come up right this minute, yeah, he would go and he'd throw in the bullpen. And then if I finally get fed up enough with Colon, then I would throw him as a starter. But so yeah, it depends on the pitcher.
Sure.
That's my thought anyway.
Cool. Yeah, no, it makes sense.
My guy that I'll throw out here is in Vancouver's organization, and it's Quentin Mullins, 22-year-old pitcher. Is 5-0 in his 7 starts in AAA, and that makes me get interested in the idea of whether he might slide into the Vancouver rotation sometime in the near future.
How about his 2 games over 120 innings or 120 pitches? How does that make you feel?
Well, it makes me feel unhappy, but that's me and a lot of other guys. A lot of other guys end up doing the same kind of thing. So who am I to argue with anyone else? But at the end of the day, 3.5 ERA, 1.2 WAR, his strikeout to walk ratio is pretty good in AAA, and he's keeping the ball in the park.
Yeah, he looks like he could definitely be serviceable here pretty soon.
Yeah, and he's also the kind of guy you talk about. You asked about starters moving into the bullpen at the major league level. I mean, this guy is a starter by all traits, but I could certainly see throwing him big innings out of the bullpen if he came up. Make him a Matume Huber kind of guy, especially if you can start a reliever for an inning or 3 and then bring him in and let him pitch as a reliever for 5 innings. I mean, that's pretty good, pretty interesting quality pitcher right there.
Yeah, I think he could be really valuable in that role for sure.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of the top 10 with a few sidecar additions, best starts or most interesting starts, at least in the minors. Anything else you got to share with us here today, Joe?
No, I'm just really enjoying, seeing a notification pop up at some point during the day, seeing that we have a new podcast. So this is awesome. This is fun. And anyone listening, I encourage you to reach out to Ron if you haven't already to volunteer your services. This is great. We should keep it up.
All righty. Well, thank you so much, Joe. I appreciate your time, and have a great day.
Thanks. You too, Ron. Good luck to your 9.
Good luck to you too.
You've been listening to the BBA Today, a podcast that covers the Brewster Baseball Association every day. Music is Bold Statement, available at BesleyandStudios.com and used with attribution. Be safe and well, and we will